Hi, I'm Lisa. Welcome back to Biblical Reality Check. In this series, we're tracing the two voices that run through the entire biblical narrative, wisdom and folly. We've seen wisdom fractured in Edom, devoured in Cain, and multiplied in Babel. Now we arrive at one of the most misunderstood stories in Scripture. Noah and the flood. This isn't a story about global destruction, ancient weather patterns, or a wooden ship buried in Turkey. Noah and the ark is the story of what happens when misalignment within the human psyche reaches critical mass and wisdom builds a vessel strong enough to survive the chaos. Noah represents that wisdom. But before we decode the symbolism, let's briefly review the narrative. In the story, humanity has spiraled into corruption and violence. However, in the midst of this chaos, Noah stands out as someone, quote, walking with God, unquote. God instructs him to build an ark because a flood is coming that will wipe away the corruption overwhelming the world. Noah gathers his family and two of every kind of animal, enters the ark, and the waters rise. Everything outside the ark is destroyed, and everything inside is preserved. After 40 days, Noah releases a raven, and it flies back and forth looking for dry land. Once the waters recede, Noah sends out a dove, and it returns with an olive leaf. In Hebrew tradition, an olive leaf symbolizes peace, hope, renewal, vitality, and a new beginning. Noah emerges into a cleansed world with restored coherence. So that's the story. Now let's decode what it actually means. Genesis chapter 6, verse 11 says the earth was corrupt and full of violence. This is not about crime. It's about internal distortion reaching critical mass. Violence is the natural outcome of misalignment and ego expansion. This is folly, grown to full size, the same folly that began in Eden and escalated through Cain and Abel. It should be noted that the word violence used in this context means the psyche turning against itself. It's the breakdown of coherence so severe that the inner world becomes hostile to its own mental health and stability. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, we're told that Noah is a righteous man who walks with God. This doesn't mean that Noah is morally good or superior. It means he's aligned. His name tells you as much. In Hebrew, Noah means rest, the still point inside the storm. Noah represents clarity, coherence, and inner stability. Noah is the part of the human psyche that still remembers the tree of life. In a mind overrun by distortion, Noah is the one voice still capable of hearing wisdom. To really understand this, we have to step inside the symbolic vocabulary of the ancient Near East, where the physical world mirrored the inner world. They didn't divide the two. Instead, they used cosmic geography to describe states of consciousness. In the symbolic language of Genesis, the earth is not the planet, it's the inner world, the human psyche. In this context, the ark isn't a boat, it's a receptacle for wisdom, The flood isn't punishment. It's what happens when misalignment overwhelms consciousness. Noah isn't a physical hero. He's the remnant of wisdom inside a psyche overwhelmed by folly. On a more personal note, there was a time in my own life when I found myself living through a flood. It was a time when my inner world collapsed, when betrayal, a workplace mobbing, and the financial, physical, and mental loss that followed triggered a storm so intense it fractured my sense of self. Dissociation, intrusive and repetitive thoughts, fear, paranoia, and fragmentation were all a part of my daily life. The waters rose fast. But even then, something inside me refused to drown. I built a home on the water, not physically, but internally, a place of beauty and safety my mind could retreat to when the storm surged. At the time it was all happening, I thought it was a coping mechanism. Later, I realized it was something older and wiser. It was my arc, the part of me that still remembered who I was and what I could become, even when my nervous system couldn't feel it yet. This is not avoidance. This is preservation. This is wisdom protecting itself. And here's the part we rarely acknowledge. Almost every one of us will face a flood at some point in our lives. Not necessarily a crisis in the outer world, but a collapse in the inner one. A moment when the structures that normally hold our reality together begin to dissolve. A moment when the waters rise. It's important to remember that wisdom doesn't cause the flood, folly does. The flood is not divine wrath. It's the natural consequence of misalignment. When egoic illusions reach critical mass, beliefs collapse, structures fail, coherence dissolves, and chaos rises. This is what happens when the inner world becomes unsustainable. The flood washes away distorted patterns so that the psyche can re enter the world coherent and aligned. In my own case, I've come to realize that the ego had to die before I could hear the hum. The animals entering the ark are not zoology. They're symbolic aspects of self instincts, drives, impulses, and latent potentials. Wisdom doesn't reject these parts, it preserves them. The aligned self knows the integration of wisdom and folly, ego and the I am, is necessary for wholeness. As the Gospel of Thomas says, when you make the two into one, then you will enter the kingdom. The flood destroys distortion, not design. It makes the two into one. The raven in the story represents restlessness, the part of the psyche still tied to chaos. It flies back and forth, unable to land. The dove represents discernment, the part of the psyche that seeks coherence. When the dove returns with an olive leaf, it signals stability, new ground, and restored alignment. This is the moment wisdom senses that the inner world is ready to rebuild. The rainbow that's mentioned in Genesis 9:16 is not a promise of no more floods. It's a symbol of reintegrated polarity. So let's look at what a rainbow actually is. A rainbow is one light refracted into many colors, unified again in the viewer's perception. It's the perfect symbol for a mind that has survived fragmentation and returned to coherence. The rainbow is the psyche remembering its original alignment. Noah and the flood is not a story about destruction. It's a story about preservation, the preservation of wisdom inside a consciousness collapsing under the weight of its own folly. The flood washes away distortion. The ark protects alignment. The dove marks the return of discernment. And the rainbow signals the restoration of coherence. Noah is the reminder that even when chaos rises, wisdom can survive if we build the structure to protect it. But survival is only the beginning. Once wisdom is preserved, once the inner world is cleared, once the ground is stable again, a new question emerges. What do you build now? What do you become? What do you commit your life to? That's where Noah ends and where Abraham begins. The biblical story of Abraham is not about survival, it's about direction, about calling, about choosing alignment on purpose, not just preserving it through crisis. If Noah is the ark, Abraham is the journey, and that's where we're headed next. Thanks for watching.